Warpugs, Janovich's Siege of Vraks series. We are... If you were thinking this is done, this isn't done yet. There is no way that this is done. There's still so much more in the Siege of Vraks. But today we're going to be talking about the Death Pit, a battle that took about 5 days for anyone in the Imperium to start making some real headway. Guys, this series, as I have said before and I'll say it again, is probably the best done series on Vraks that I have seen. There's still so much more to talk about with this. There's still so much more. The heretics are not done on Vraks. There is still so much left to go through. There's still so much left to see to. But Warpugs will be here for it. But for right now, we're going to be looking at episode 20 of the Siege of Vraks from Janovich. All of his links are going to be in the description down below. Please go check him out. We're going to continue on with this once more episodes become available. But as it stands right now, guys, we're caught up. Hooray! Hooray! Let's get into it.
Hello everyone, this is Artemis speaking. If you can't quite tell, I'm the guy who's been narrating Jan's content for the past 2 years. It's been quite a journey, and I want to thank you all for your continued support of all of our different series. And speaking of support, if you were ever able and willing to, I would humbly ask that you donate to my Ko-fi, or however you say it. Just
Description
thank you all
below,
so much
guys.
for your love and support of the series. It drives both Jan and I forward to keep making more for all of you. Now that's enough out of me. Thanks again, and I hope you enjoy the next part of Vraks. The first attack of the 30th Line Corps against the Citadel had met with a disastrous end. The hero of Fort A453, Colonel Tyborg, and the troops under his command had been pushed back by a summoning of Khorne's bloodletters. Only a handful had managed to make it back to their own trench lines and lived to tell the tale. The broken and disgraced remnants of the 261st were disbanded and merged with the remaining regiments. But the shaken troops...
And you can bet the survivors did not have a lot of fun because retreating is not in a Krieger's vocabulary in most cases.
Troops of the 30th Line Corps were not out of the action yet. The assault against the Citadel would have to continue. Now, it was the 269th Regiment's turn to impregnate the bitch. Hector Rex was well aware that it would...
I love the Game of Thrones reference.
Be foolish to send another regiment straight into the meat grinder and expect different results. While making preparations
come on, that's not very
next
imperial
assault,
of you.
He spent long hours digging through the extensive strategic archives and finally dusted off one of the many complex attack plans drawn up by the late Marshal Cavalry, who was known for his mastery of combined arms warfare. During his time as
Rest in
commander,
peace.
he had worked on many preliminary battle plans for besieging the Citadel. His strategies had proven their merit before. This priceless reference from a seasoned Imperial commander was just what the Inquisitor could use right now. The plan included a main thrust against the Citadel's armory gate, supported by a Space Marine drop pod assault. Air squadrons would perform bombing raids. The attack would be supported by Titans and various diversion attacks. Hector X modified these plans to better fit the troops at his current disposal. The 269th 3rd Company would be tasked with achieving the main objective. They would approach the Citadel from the north, along the gully, to besiege the gate inside the ravine. Diversion attacks would approach from the east and pressure the main and cardinal gate. The artillery would
There it
use
is,
the
right there.
experience they had
This is what this story is about. This attack right here.
gained in the previous battle to better suppress the Citadel's void shields and wall gunners. As the main attack passed the gully, parts of the 3rd Company would split off to assault the laser defense station. Fortunately, the massive weapon had already been knocked out of action during an earlier bombardment.
Yay!
However, the structure remained a forward strong point for the defenders that needed to be dealt with. As the infantry cleared the ravine of defenders, combat engineers would move up to place demolition charges and blow breaches into the gate doors. At this moment, their Space Marine allies would perform a drop-pod assault into the ravine on the other side. The Astartes would clear the way for the engineers to advance, allowing them to blow another hole into the armory gate to force themselves away into the Citadel's undercroft. This daring attack would surely draw the defenders' attention and would be expected to send troops to reinforce the armory gate. That's when the Navy bombers would come in to rain down a precision airstrike upon the lower gate spur. The remaining companies, supported by Titans, would then perform an all-out attack to capture it and establish a forward base of operation right next to the Citadel itself.
Yeah.
If possible, they would then storm all the way up to the St. Leonis Gate. During the battle, the heavy tanks of the 11th Assault Corps would lend their support wherever required. The strategy appeared solid. Now it was up to Hector X to make sure the execution would go as smoothly as could realistically be expected. The preliminary bombardment began to rain down steel upon the Vraksians' defenses and probe for weaknesses in the void shields. On 081-830 Millennia 41, the attack began when the 269th Regiment climbed out of their trenches and began their daunting march towards the Citadel. From the very first moments, things did not go nearly as expediently as had been hoped. Resistance in the gully was much stronger than expected. A large number of defenders had stationed themselves there, conveniently covered by advantageous features of the terrain. Many Vraksian tanks were waiting for the Imperial advance in concealed firing positions. They could pick their approaching targets at leisure and deal significant damage. With little more than the enemy tank barrels exposed, there was little the Death Corps tanks could do in the way of offering effective return fire. Unfazed by the initial heavy losses, the brave soldiers of Krieg continued their advance regardless. Surely, once they closed the distance, they would eventually be able to get the upper hand.
Eventually.
The troops equipped bayonets and were confident that these ragtag defenders would run as soon as the tide of steel arrived. Unfortunately, they were in for a nasty surprise, and their overconfidence would soon be punished. It turned out that the Iron Warriors warband called the Steel Brethren had reinforced this sector. Throughout
Hooray!
the ages, these traitor marines had fought countless battles, accumulating millennia of knowledge on how to build the most optimal defenses. Even the most up-to-date maps the 88th possessed had not taken these unfortunate facts into account. These masters of siegecraft had fortified the gully and turned it into an expertly crafted kill zone. Of course, the Death Corps had faced strongly defended positions before, but considering what the Steel Brethren had to work with, these proved far more proficient than any of the other improvised Vraksian positions. Hidden bunkers had been constructed in every key point of the line. Waves of Death Corps troops were mowed down in the overlapping fields of fire. The rough terrain made armored support next to impossible, and progress was painfully slow.
Yay.
To make things worse, the company commander was killed in action. Even by Death Corps standards, every bunker and gun position they captured came at the cost of an eye-watering amount of casualty. The steel...
And for that to be said by Kriegers, that is, that's severe.
Brethren had made sure of that. In desperation, a significant portion of the 88th's heavy artillery would retarget to prioritize firing upon the gully. Before long, an ungodly amount of explosive munitions were concentrated on this relatively small section of the front. For good measure, the Reaver Titan Astor Tyrannus was sent into action as well.
Welcome
Once
back.
in position, it deployed its powerful laser weapons to accurately blast the most strongly defended positions into molten slag. The concentrated fire raining down upon their positions caused cracks in the resolve of the defenders. Unwilling to face heavy losses, the Chaos Warband slowly withdrew from their base and trickled back into the Citadel. Without the...
There's really not much ways, there's not many ways for you to prepare for the fact that a Titan is going to be on the field. This is why when people talk about Titans, how, you know, they are a very unrealistic weapons platform. When things like this come into play, I mean, yes, it is a very unrealistic weapons platform, but so is a nuke. And We have those we have those very much. So are Moabs. They're highly expensive. They took a long time for us to actually prepare, but they have their purpose. And overkill sometimes is the only way to get through a line.
In support of their traitor marine allies, the remaining militia troops proved far less potent defenders. Under cover of the bombardment, the infantry's advance commenced. Due to the heavy losses, the secondary objective of attacking the defense laser station was called off. All troops were told to move directly into the ravine to assault the gate instead. Their concentrated attack was of course obvious for the defenders to observe, and so the Vraksians had no problem coordinating an effective artillery strike that pinned down the attacks that now streamed into the now increasingly crowded ravine. Meanwhile, efforts of the diversion attacks were ramped up. But as reinforcements of the 7th Company marched towards the citadel, they were ambushed by the Alpha Legion. Their warriors sprung up behind the Krieg advance from the ruins of an abandoned manufactorum facility, likely by traveling through secret underground tunnels. The surprise attack targeted the unsuspected columns of tanks and artillery on their way towards the front, and caused havoc amongst their logistics. Without fire support, the infantry further ahead was pretty much operationally ineffective against the citadel's wall. Caught between a rock and a hard place, the remaining troops of the 7th Company were getting wiped out. For the 3rd Company, losses continued to mount. They were finally provided a lucky break when the amount of enemy fire appeared to diminish. It seemed that the defenders were running low on munitions. Not going to let this opportunity go to waste, they once again moved forward, further into the ravine, and the engineers could attempt to begin their demolition operation. The Red Hunters' drop-pod assault had been delayed thus far. But with this good news, their mission could finally commence. Their strike cruiser transferred full power to its void shields and moved above the citadel, exposing itself to the remaining laser defense weapon. Once in position, a first wave of Deathstorm drop pods rained from the sky. Upon contact with the ground, these extremely heavily armed pods automatically fired their servitor-guided weapons into the direct vicinity. The initial strike proved highly effective as the Vraksian troops caught in the blast zone were annihilated. Following up the initial blow, 150 battle brothers of the Red Hunters, accompanied by 4 heavily armored Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus, now came hurtling from the skies in a second wave to clean up the remaining resistance and secure the gate from the inside. Unfortunately, almost all of the 3rd Company's officers had been killed in action already. They had lost the veteran leadership required to properly coordinate their attacks with the arrival of the Red Hunters. To make matters worse, due to their concealed position between the walls of the ravine, they had not been able to observe that the drop-pod assault had already taken place. The engineers still had not successfully produced a breach, and the two forces remained separated, each on their own side of the gate.
This is what's called being cut off.
When the complete Red Hunter strike force had successfully made planetfall, they would be met with an unexpected event. The massive armory doors in the cliffside of the citadel slowly began to open up to reveal a Chaos Reaver Titan. With its cockpit almost up to the ceiling of the armory gate, it barely managed to march out. To the Red Hunter's horror, they were now locked inside the death pit with a Titan with no way out.
This is bad. If you're ever wondering, if you have a question at all, this is a very unbelievably bad thing.
As always, a drop-pod assault is a one-way ticket. As the God Machine began to fire into them at point-blank range, the Marines scattered across the death pit, desperately scrambling for any cover they could find. They quickly made contact with the 88th Army High Command, imploring them to immediately breach that damn gate. In turn, High Command sent urgent requests to the 3rd Company to verify what the hell they were up to. Lord Commander Hector Rex, who was stationed with the 13th Company, was swiftly informed of the dire situation. He could not afford to lose the majority of his allied Astartes and immediately began organizing a full-scale rescue operation. There was, however, little that could be done to help them. Artillery against the Chaos Titan would land danger close to the Marines. The Reaver Titan Astor Tyrannus had no line of sight to fire its laser weapons in support. His best hope was for the Death Corps to produce a breach, allowing the Red Hunters to withdraw down the ravine. Once communication with the few surviving lower-ranked Death Corps officers in the ravine had been established, they were ordered to hasten their attack against the gate immediately, no matter the cost.
Yeah, that's the statement of the day. Hurry the fuck up.
With no time to waste, a Stormblade was brought forth. With complete disregard for the safety of the vehicle or its crew, they repeatedly fired its plasma weapons point blank into the gate until the tank was completely spent. The engineers followed up by hurriedly preparing their satchel charges. On the other side, the battle was about to turn from bad to worse.
Yeah.
Beneath the feet of the Chaos Titan, hordes of Vraksian renegade militia now stormed out of the armory, charging at the Red Hunters. This forced them out of concealment and defended themselves against the charge.
And if you think that the Titan isn't going to shoot a couple of, 10 traitors to take out one Space Marine...
Meanwhile, the God Machine continued to pour its weapons indiscriminately into the melee below. The Red Hunters' numbers were dwindling fast. The tank's plasma weapons had vaporized a hole in the thick metal gate wide enough for the Death Corps infantry to move through. Spending no time on hesitation, they charged straight into the carnage. Behind them, the 35th and 36th Company Death Riders Reserves had been ordered to immediately charge full speed up the ravine.
Yep.
Honoring their reputation for unwavering resolve and reckless bravery, the Death Riders mounted up and galloped towards their inevitable doom. The impending mass of horses made an excellent target for the Vraksian gunners upon the walls. With a complete disregard for their own survival, they charged through artillery and gunfire, heavily maimed by the effects of minefields and barbed wire that they galloped over. The legs of the mounts were torn to shreds. Fueled by a potent cocktail of combat stims, the horses continued their stampede through the wreckage and...
It's almost wrong to call Krieg Cavalry animals horses. It's almost incorrect.
corpses that littered the ravine. The demolition charges were blown, and the gate crashed down just in time for the galloping riders to continue on their way. With a maddening speed, they finally delivered their charge of exploding lances as they charged into their foe. With slashing sabers and kicking horses, they drove the mob of Vraksian militia before them, but by then it was already too late. Despite the unreserved heroism of their charge, the Red Hunters had already been practically wiped out. Their strike force had been pounded into dust by the Chaos Reaver Titan's relentless guns. Zhufor and his Khornate berserkers now entered the fray and cut the Krieg reinforcements down to the last man in a gory massacre. The Death Pit had earned its name. The corpses of men and horses alike strewn the battlefield. At this point, a mere handful of mortally wounded Red Hunters were barely hanging on to life, only sustained by their superhuman implants. These survivors were captured and dragged into the catacombs of the Citadel, where we can only speculate as to what horrible fate befell them. This was a devastating setback for Lord Hector Rex. Apart from being a severe military loss, this would also be a major political blow. Under his leadership, 150 loyal Space Marines of a renowned chapter had been sacrificed with absolutely nothing to show for it. And yet another Krieg regiment had been pulverized in the meat grinder. Even someone as mighty as a Lord Inquisitor would not be able to sweep this under the rug.
Nope.
As word of this crucial failure spread, his allies would certainly lose faith in his military leadership.
You lose 150 guardsmen, nobody bats an eye. You lose 150 tanks. The Minotaur might want to ask you why. You lose 150 Astartes, no one's willing to work with you anymore, because how in the fuck did you manage to do that? Like, that is a question that you're never going to hear the end of. You will hear it every single time you poke your head out. How in the blazing hill of fuck did you manage to lose a company and a half of Space Marines?
But before he would have time to overthink the consequences, the roar of the 1099th's airplanes could be heard flying overhead. A massive formation of bombers was approaching the Citadel to perform their assigned bombardment campaign. The Vraksian flak guns opened up to fend off the aerial attack. The airships were forced to fly relatively low in order to perform their airstrike with any semblance of accuracy. Several of them were hit and crashed down towards the surface, but the formation was too numerous for the limited number of remaining anti-air guns to effectively counter them. As the bombers flew overhead, they dropped their massive payloads into the lower gate spur's general vicinity. A deafening, continuous roar of explosions ensued, and the western side of the mountain was engulfed in flames and covered in a thick blanket of smoke. As the lost plane flew overhead and the dust finally cleared, the damage they had inflicted was apparent. Up to 4 breaches had been blown into the lower gate spur, 2 of its towers had been turned into rubble. Even the massive laser defense battery seemed to be knocked out of action. The Inquisitor desperately required a breakthrough, anything to make up for the terrible losses they had already suffered. Hector Rex ordered the 13th Company to move forward with great haste. With some luck, they would be able to arrive at the wall before the Vraksians had time to prepare their defenses in the bombed-out rubble. If they could not capture it now, then Hector Rex might as well consider his immediate resignation as commander.
Immediate resignation might be a little bit of an understatement there. Immediate retirement, because apparently you've lost your damn mind losing what you just lost.
Death Corps were marching up the slopes.
I'll say it like this. There's only a few things that are comparable to that. There's only a few things that are comparable to that, and there's only one example in the lore where I think, in a single engagement, someone holds, it's... I'm not going to make the comparison because that's unfair to the Lord Inquisitor.
I'm going
to leave it there.
The defenders were scrambling like rats to improvise new defensive positions. High Princeps Droka, with his Titan Praetorian, and 2 other Reaver Titans, Tritus and Invictorus, followed in their wake, blasting the Vraksians with their long-range weapons. The Death Corps infantry made their way up the Pilgrim Road with cold steel ready and charged into the breaches. Things seemed to be going as well as could be expected. That was until the armored plates around the laser defense silo started opening up and aiming its weapons. The bastion it was mounted upon might have been heavily scarred by the air raid, but buried within, its weaponry and power supplies had survived.
That's a bad day.
The alarm systems of the Legio Restorum Titans went on full alert as the incredibly potent laser energy source started powering up its generators. Reaver-class Tritus was the most close by and immediately fired a full load of rockets at the station, but it was already too late. And a massive laser penetrated straight through the Reaver's frontal armor and critically damaged the plasma reactor within. The Titans staggered under the impact, came to a halt, and then the reactor exploded in a spectacular fashion. With the force of a small sun, the God Machine exploded. In the blink of an eye, everything within a 100-meter radius of the detonation was evaporated. The heat shockwave of the blast scorched close-by infantry and vehicles alike. Panicked orders rang out over the Voxnet.
This Inquisitor cannot catch a break.
To bring the defense laser down, a devastating amount of artillery and lasers were brought onto the laser silo before it would be able to fire another shot. But the weapon was already dead, destroyed after the initial salvo of rockets hit the exposed gun. Its crew had deliberately sacrificed itself for a kill shot at the Titan. Hector Rex had more than enough of these setbacks. Motivated by the desire for personal vengeance rather than for any strategic reasons, he charged personally into battle with his...
because sometimes being pissed off is better than anything.
Inquisition Guard troops in his wake. The Vraksian resistance was wiped out, and the lower gate spur was in Imperial hands. For good measure, they placed a demolition charge into the defense silo and blew it up for good. But the battle wasn't over yet. As the Imperial troops prepared to set up a forward base to consolidate their new position, a ragtag collection of demon engines charged forth from the St. Leonis Gate, supported by the Black Brothers of Arius. By now, the 88th Siege Army had gained a lot of hard-earned experience fighting these monstrosities. Fighting side by side with the Ordo Malleus elite troops, the soldiers from Krieg were able to hold their own. A savage battle around the lower gate spur continued into the night. But in the darkness, the Death Corps troops were at a significant disadvantage compared to the well-equipped Astartes, and by daybreak, the 13th Company was on the brink of being pushed back. Hector Rex could not allow this to happen, and decided to summon the Grey Knights to his position. This time, the demon hunters wasted no time. Silver land raiders raced across the Pilgrim Road to come to their aid. Upon arrival, the assault ramps dropped and the Grey Knights disembarked. The freshly arrived reinforcements, armed with their Nemesis Force weapons, made short work of the foe. After suffering crippling losses, the few remaining traitors fell back towards the citadel. Despite the great many setbacks, at least the 88th Siege Army was now in firm control of the ruins that once made up the lower gate spur. It was by all accounts truly a Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah.
The remaining Red Hunters on Vraks had been reduced to a mere token force. Legio Astorum had lost one of their irreplaceable god machines, and once more the spent remnants of an utterly broken regiment would be redistributed amongst the 30th Line Corps. If this was the price they were going to pay every time they attacked the citadel, then things looked grim indeed. Considering the citadel's main gates were still standing, the small gains they made was but a consolation prize. There was, however, a silver lining that would provide Hector Rex with another chance. The Red Scorpions were on their way towards Vraks.
Yay!
Chapter Master Variant Ortus had mustered a considerable force of 400 battle brothers, including many veterans from their first mission. Commander Ainia and Sergeant Cullen, who had led the successful assault against the Curtain Wall breach, were amongst them. In 159-830 Millennia 41, the battle barge Sword of Orden, carrying the Red Scorpion strike force, arrived on Vraks.
Here we go. These kinds of losses in any Imperial battle are horrifying. To lose 150 Astartes in one engagement is career-ending for pretty much anybody associated with it. Losing a Titan on top of that in the same battle, if they hadn't breached the gate, if not for the bombing, that would have been the hardest message to really reach out to, because now you've pissed off everybody. The Men of Storm is pissed off because you got a massive number of infantry killed. The Astartes are pissed off because 150 of them died with no gain. The Mechanicus is pissed off because you let one of their prize machines get one tapped out of existence. There is no one that's happy right now. And the High Lords are pissed off, because they're always pissed off. If not for the bombing run, if not for the Grey Knights, if nothing had been gained, Hector Rex would have been probably killed by an assassin, if he was lucky. If he was lucky, he'd be killed by an assassin. If he was unlucky, worse. Warpugs, we are all caught up with Janovich's Siege of Vraks. I hope you guys enjoyed this, because, like I said, this is the best. This is the absolute best. We're going to be jumping back into this once a new one is released. But until then, Warpugs, check the links in the description below, hit the like button, leave a comment, and join as a member of Patreon for early access. I will catch you guys next time, and I hope you have a great day.